Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. The day she set the ring down on the kitchen counter, I didn't say a word. It was a small sound, that soft metallic tap against the granite, but it was louder than any fight we'd ever had. I stood there in my faded Carhartt hoodie, grease still on my hands from a 12-hour HVAC shift, watching her walk past me in a silk blouse she'd probably bought at Nordstrom. She didn't even look back. No tears, no hesitation. Just placed the ring like it was an old receipt and moved on. I'm 36. She's 32. We'd been together almost 7 years, and I thought I knew what silence meant in a marriage. But that silence, hers, mine, the space between, was different. It wasn't tired or routine. It was final. I felt something in my chest lock up, the way a compressor seizes when it's been running too long without oil. And in that moment, I realized she didn't have to say a word. She was done. By nightfall, I had 2 duffel bags packed. My boots, my tools, a stack of Levi's. I didn't slam drawers, didn't curse under my breath, didn't even ask her why. I'd spent too many years giving her the benefit of the doubt, swallowing down the quiet digs and the little moments when she made me feel small. Like last Christmas, when she laughed with her friends about how I still shop at Lowe's instead of West Elm. Or last week, when I offered to fix her car, and she told her coworker over speakerphone that I was too good at being a handyman to ever dream bigger. I'd laughed it off then, told myself it didn't matter. But it stuck. Those little moments always did. And now here we were. The ring on the counter, her curled up on the couch scrolling through her phone like I wasn't even there, and me standing in the kitchen realizing she'd just freed me without even knowing it. I took a last look at the space we'd called home. Trader Joe's wine still on the table from the night before, her yoga mat rolled out by the window, the faint smell of the vanilla candles she loved. It was her world more than ours, and I had been a tenant, not a partner. For years I told myself peace was enough, that no drama meant love. But peace built on indifference isn't peace. It's a waiting room. So I left. No speech, no confrontation. Just keys on the counter, next to the ring she didn't want anymore. By the time the sun went down, she had all the space she'd been asking for, and more. What she didn't know, and what I finally understood, was that when a man like me goes quiet, that's the loudest goodbye she'll ever hear. I didn't expect her to notice right away. That was the first surprise. When I came back from loading the duffel bags into my truck, she was still on the couch, feet tucked under her, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even glance at the bags lined by the door. Maybe she thought I was heading to a late emergency call. Maybe she thought I was bluffing. Either way, she stayed quiet, and so did I. The first crack came later that night. She walked into the kitchen and saw the empty drawer where my t-shirts used to be. She stood there for a moment, hand resting on the counter, eyes scanning the space like she was trying to calculate what was missing. She called my name once, casual at first, then again, sharper. I didn't answer. I was out in the garage, tossing sockets and wrenches into my toolbox, making more noise than I usually allowed myself. That was the only sound I gave her, metal against metal. When I came back inside, she looked at me differently. Her voice was flat when she asked, "You're packing?" I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because there was nothing to say. The ring she'd set down had already spoken louder than either of us could. She waited, maybe for an explanation, maybe for me to beg. But I just walked past her, grabbed another stack of jeans, and folded them into the bag. Her silence had always been control. Mine was finality. She retreated to the bedroom after that. I heard drawers open, the faint slam of a door, the soft rustle of fabric. Maybe she thought packing her own things would make it even. But an hour later, when I walked down the hall, I noticed nothing was gone. She'd pulled out a suitcase, left it open on the bed, but nothing was inside. She wanted the illusion of leaving without the reality of it. I gave her that. I didn't comment, didn't touch her suitcase, didn't even glance at it again. By midnight, the house was too quiet. No TV humming in the background, no candles burning in the kitchen, just the sound of 2 people pretending they weren't already living separate lives. I lay down on the couch, pulled a blanket over me, and stared at the ceiling. For years I'd been the man who fixed things, the leaky faucets, the broken locks, even her bad days. But this wasn't mine to fix. She'd asked for space, in words and in actions, and I was giving it to her in the only way I knew how. The next morning, she lingered in the kitchen longer than usual. Made her coffee slow, stirred it twice instead of once, glanced at the bags by the door. For the first time, I saw the faintest edge of panic in her eyes. Like she was realizing that the silence she'd depended on was no longer the kind she controlled. As I sat on the edge of that couch, staring at the bags by the door, I started thinking back. It wasn't one big betrayal that broke us. It was the steady drip of small things, the kind that eat through concrete if you let them. I remembered the way she used to roll her eyes when I came home in my work boots, dust still clinging to my jeans. She'd make little jokes in front of her friends about me smelling like a job site, while they all sipped wine from Trader Joe's and laughed politely. I laughed too, but deep down it cut. I was the man keeping the lights on, keeping the air cool, making sure the heat kicked in on those freezing mornings, and yet somehow, I was the punchline. Then there were the errands she never wanted to touch. She'd wave a hand and tell me to grab things from Lowe's or Home Depot, because she was too busy. She'd say it like my time was worth less than hers. I'd walk those aisles alone, pushing a cart full of things she needed, while she bought another overpriced jacket from Nordstrom. She called it balance. I called it sacrifice. I thought of the nights she'd sit across the table scrolling her phone while I tried to talk about my day. I'd stop mid-sentence, waiting for her to look up, but she rarely did. The one time I asked if she'd heard me, she smiled faintly and said, "You worry too much. You're too soft." I let that one pass, but it stuck with me. Soft. As if caring too much about her life, her moods, her silences made me weak. The truth is, I gave her everything I knew how to give. I fixed her car before winter set in. I repaired her mother's dishwasher without charging a dime. I carried in heavy boxes from Costco while she stood in the doorway giving directions like a foreman. I thought that was love. She thought it was expected. Somewhere along the way, my effort stopped being seen as devotion and started being seen as weakness. That morning, while she stirred her coffee slower than usual, I noticed her studying me from the corner of her eye, like she was trying to read whether my silence was a bluff or a warning. She didn't know yet that it was neither. It was my goodbye. I realized then that I'd been invisible for years, long before she set that ring down. I'd been the man she leaned on, not the man she looked at. And as much as it stung, there was something freeing about knowing the truth. You can't fix what someone doesn't value. When she finally left for work, slinging her designer bag over her shoulder, I didn't say goodbye. I just listened to the door close, sat back on the couch, and let the quiet wash over me. For the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It felt like the start of something else. The proof didn't come in a dramatic way. No lipstick on a collar, no strangers knocking at the door. It came in the same quiet way everything else between us had shifted, subtle, almost forgettable if you weren't paying attention. She left her phone face down on the counter one night while she showered. Normally, she carried it everywhere, like it was another limb. That night, the screen lit up with a message. Just a first name and a heart. Nothing else. I didn't reach for it at first. I told myself it wasn't my business, that if she wanted me to know, she'd tell me. But then another message popped up. "Last night was perfect. Can't stop thinking about you." My stomach tightened, but my hands stayed still. I didn't scroll. I didn't dig deeper. I didn't need to. Sometimes the first crack is enough to show you how deep the fracture goes. She came back into the kitchen, damp hair tied up, moving like nothing in the world was wrong. She picked up the phone, saw my eyes flicker toward it, and for just a second her smile froze. Then it was back, smooth and practiced, as if nothing had happened. She asked if I wanted tea. I shook my head. That was the only answer I gave her. From then on, I started noticing patterns I'd ignored. The locked bathroom door more often than before. The faint perfume that lingered even though we hadn't gone anywhere together. The late nights explained away with work, but never any files or deadlines to show for it. She was building a separate life right in front of me, confident I'd never question it. And she was right. I didn't question. I observed. When she laughed at her screen while sitting 2 feet from me on the couch, I didn't ask who it was. When she disappeared for hours without explanation, I didn't press her. I just made my coffee in the morning, laced up my work boots, and went on with my day. That was the difference between us. She thought control came from secrets. I knew control came from silence. 2 weeks passed like that, the quiet between us heavier than ever. She probably thought she was winning, that I was too blind or too passive to notice. But in truth, I was taking inventory, packing piece by piece, removing myself without leaving a trace. The more she drifted into her other life, the easier it became for me to step out of the one we'd built together. I didn't need confrontation. I didn't need tears or apologies. I needed clarity, and now I had it. She'd shown me where her heart was. All I had to do was decide where mine would go next. The first move wasn't loud, and it wasn't revenge. It was practical, almost boring. I started by pulling back the parts of my life she had taken for granted. Small things she never noticed until they were gone. I cut off the auto payments that covered her gym membership at that Loyalman Heavy studio downtown. I switched the utilities into her name and canceled my portion of the joint streaming accounts. Quiet adjustments, but each one a thread pulled from the fabric she thought would never unravel. At work, I took on extra shifts, not for the money but for the distance. The more hours I spent crawling through ductwork and fixing thermostats in strangers' houses, the less time I spent in her orbit. When she called once, asking why I wasn't home for dinner, I let it ring. She texted a short question mark. I didn't answer. Silence does more damage than words ever could. But the real shift came when I finally saw the man she was slipping off to meet. I didn't follow her. I didn't snoop. I just happened to be at a coffee shop one morning, Dunkin' on the corner near a job site, when she walked in. She wasn't alone. He was with her. Younger than me, polished, probably some mid-level manager who wore loafers instead of boots. He leaned in close as she laughed, her hand brushing his arm like muscle memory. I didn't move from my table. I didn't confront them. I simply watched long enough to etch the picture into my mind, then walked out without touching my coffee. That afternoon, I called in a favor from a buddy who worked in building maintenance for her office complex. Nothing shady, nothing illegal. Just a quiet request to shift her parking pass to the far end of the lot, the kind of place she'd have to walk alone at night. I didn't want harm to come to her. I wanted inconvenience. I wanted her to feel the absence of the invisible ways I'd been protecting her life. No more easy spots by the entrance, no more shortcuts she didn't realize I'd smoothed out for her. Days later, she complained that nothing felt simple anymore. The little comforts had started slipping, the easy rhythm of her routine thrown off. She didn't connect it to me, not yet. She thought life was suddenly more difficult. But I knew the truth, it wasn't life. It was me, stepping back, pulling away, reminding her without a single word that I'd been the quiet force keeping her world steady. And the more I stepped away, the more her new world with him began to wobble. It didn't take long for the silence to spread beyond the walls of our house. People notice when a man changes, especially the kind of man who was once predictable. I'd always been steady, the guy who showed up on time, carried the groceries, fixed the sink without being asked. Now, I was the guy who gave short nods instead of small talk, who left gatherings early without excuses. That shift doesn't stay invisible for long. Her friends started to pick up on it first. At a backyard barbecue, one of them asked where I'd been lately. I shrugged, said work had me busy, then turned away before she could press further. I caught the flicker of surprise on her face. They were used to me being available, polite, easygoing. Now I was polite in the cold way, the kind that leaves people second-guessing what they missed. Then came the coworkers. I ran into one of hers at Trader Joe's on a Saturday morning. He smiled, said he hadn't seen me around much, asked if everything was all right. I told him everything was fine, but my tone made it clear the conversation was over. Later, I heard he mentioned it to her at the office, said I seemed distant, like I was already halfway gone. She brushed it off, but I knew it planted a seed. People notice when the anchor in a relationship stops holding. Even her parents noticed. Her mother called one evening, asking if we were coming over for Sunday dinner. I handed her the phone without a word. I watched her hesitate, watched the way her face tightened as she stumbled through an excuse. She was used to me smoothing things over, making the polite calls, keeping appearances intact. Without that buffer, her control slipped. It wasn't that I was trying to make her look bad. I wasn't saying anything at all. That was the point. My absence spoke louder than explanations ever could. People sensed it. They didn't know the details, but they felt the shift in weight. And slowly, the sympathy she counted on started to turn. At work, her friends no longer gushed about our relationship. At brunch, her laughter sounded forced. And every time someone asked where I'd been, she was the one left fumbling for answers. For years, she had been the one holding the script. Now, she stood in front of an audience without lines, realizing she'd lost the one person who made her story believable. That's the thing about silence. It doesn't just haunt the house you share. It echoes in every room she walks into, until everyone else starts hearing it too. The cold didn't arrive with a slam of a door or a raised voice. It came like winter, slow, steady, creeping into the corners until the whole house felt different. I was still there. My boots still by the door, my thermos still on the counter, my toolbox still tucked in the garage. But I wasn't there for her anymore. Mornings became my own. I'd fill my stainless steel thermos with Starbucks coffee before heading to a job site. Some days I'd take the long way, just to buy myself an extra 20 minutes of quiet before the noise of compressors and ductwork. I'd sit in my truck, sipping, watching the sun climb over the strip malls and parking lots. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of rushing home. Evenings shifted too. I started running again, lacing up my New Balance sneakers after work and hitting the streets alone. No music, no company, just the sound of my feet hitting pavement and my breath cutting through the night air. At first, the runs were short, my body heavy from months of neglect. But soon they stretched longer, each mile carrying me further from the life I no longer wanted to salvage. At home, I was present in the physical sense. I sat on the couch, ate my dinner, read articles on my phone. But I was untouchable. She'd hover in the doorway sometimes, trying to start a conversation. I'd answer with one-word replies, not cold enough to start a fight, but distant enough to make sure she knew I was no longer tethered to her. The warmth she had once dismissed as softness was gone. In its place was a kind of silence she couldn't manage. She tried to mask her unease with routines, lighting candles, asking about my day, cooking meals she hadn't made in months. But none of it mattered anymore. I ate quietly, thanked her without emotion, and went back to my book. The man who once bent over backwards to make her comfortable was gone, replaced by one who gave her exactly what she'd asked for, space. The truth is, I had already left. My body was in the house, but my spirit was elsewhere. In the early mornings with coffee in hand, in the miles of road I covered under streetlights, in the quiet corners of my mind where she no longer had access. And the more I lived in that silence, the less I saw her as my partner. She became just another presence in the room, fading into the background of a life that no longer belonged to us. By then, she must have realized it too. She hadn't lost me in a fight, or to another woman, or to some dramatic exit. She'd lost me to the simplest, most irreversible thing of all, my silence. The night she finally broke the silence, it was almost too late. I had just come back from a late job, the kind that leaves your hands raw and your clothes smelling like dust and copper. I dropped my boots by the door, poured black coffee into a chipped mug, and sat at the kitchen table. She walked in wearing the same silk robe she used to save for special nights. But this time, there was no spark in me that cared. She leaned against the counter, trying for casual at first. She said she missed how things used to be, that she wanted us back. Her voice carried a tremor, but I kept my eyes on the mug in front of me. When I didn't answer, she shifted tactics. She stepped closer, her tone softer, almost pleading. She said I didn't have to be so cold, that we could fix this if I just tried. Her hand brushed my shoulder like it used to, but it felt foreign now, like the touch of a stranger. When that didn't work, her voice sharpened. She asked if there was someone else, accused me of punishing her, said I was acting childish. Each word was a rope thrown out, trying to pull me back into her control. But I had already cut those ties. I sat there quietly, letting her storm crash against a wall she no longer had access to. Finally, she demanded an answer. Her voice cracked as she asked what had happened to us, why I wouldn't fight for her, why I was just slipping away. That's when I looked up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse or explain. I just told her the truth in the simplest way I could. I said, "You didn't ask when it mattered. And now, it doesn't matter anymore." The words landed harder than any fight we could have had. Her face went pale, the color draining as if she finally understood what my silence had meant all along. She tried to speak again, but nothing came out. She just stood there, robe wrapped tight, staring at me like I'd turned into a stranger overnight. The truth was, I hadn't changed overnight. I had been changing for months, inch by inch, until there was nothing left for her to hold on to. And when she finally realized it, when she tried to reel me back in, it was too late. My silence wasn't anger. It wasn't punishment. It was the sound of a man already gone. Her unraveling didn't start with me walking out the door. It started with the way people around her began to look at her differently. For years she had lived on the image she crafted, polished, confident, always in control. She carried herself like someone who had all the answers, and people believed it because I was always there in the background, steady and silent, making sure the foundation held. But when my silence turned cold, the cracks began to show. Her friends were the first to notice. The same women who used to envy her life started to pull back. At brunch, she tried to laugh and tell stories, but they rang hollow. She once bragged about the flowers on her counter, the trips I planned, the quiet strength she leaned on. Now there was nothing to tell, and the silence she used to mock in me became hers to sit in. I heard from someone later that one of them had asked, "Do you think he's really still there, or just waiting to leave?" It was the kind of question that spreads, and it followed her. Her parents weren't immune either. I stopped going to Sunday dinners, stopped being the one to carry bags from their car or fix their broken light fixtures. She tried to explain it away, saying I was busy or tired, but they knew better. A mother notices when the man her daughter depends on no longer looks at her the same. A father sees when the respect is gone. Soon, she stopped inviting me altogether, and that absence didn't go unnoticed. Even at work, the image slipped. A coworker saw her leaving late one night, not with me, but with him, the polished man in loafers. Word traveled fast. Whispers in offices are louder than shouts in kitchens. The woman who once prided herself on control now carried the weight of rumors she couldn't stop. She started arriving earlier, staying later, trying to outrun the gossip. But gossip has a way of sticking, especially when people sense blood in the water. At home, the silence grew heavier. She lit candles, tried cooking elaborate meals, dressed up for dinners that never happened. She hovered at the edge of the couch, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to give her back the life she once controlled. But I didn't move. I gave her nothing but the same quiet she had dismissed for years. And the more she reached, the further she slipped. Her collapse wasn't dramatic. It was slow, humiliating, the kind of downfall no one can hide from. The woman who once believed she had everything under control was losing not because of me, but because she had underestimated what it meant when a man like me went silent. The end didn't come with a fight. It came with a key. I left it on the counter, right where she'd set down the ring weeks before. No note, no explanation. Just a small piece of metal that no longer unlocked anything I wanted. I packed the last of my things into the truck before sunrise. The air was cool, the streets empty, and for the first time in a long time, I felt lighter. There was no rush, no anger pushing me out the door. It was simple. My time there was done. She stirred once as I closed the door behind me, but she didn't wake. Maybe she thought she had another day to pull me back. She didn't. That morning, my life began to take on a rhythm that was mine alone. Work at 6, Dunkin' coffee in hand, the radio low. No texts buzzing in my pocket, no calls demanding explanations. Just me, my thermos, and the steady hum of the highway before dawn. At lunch, I sat on the tailgate of my truck, eating a sandwich I'd packed myself, watching people rush in and out of strip malls. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about what I'd need to pick up for her at Trader Joe's or which gift would make her smile again. My thoughts were my own, and they were quiet. Evenings stretched out differently too. I ran farther, cooked simple meals, read in silence. Sometimes I went out with the guys from work, sat at a bar with a cold beer, and let the noise of their stories wash over me. Other times I stayed in, the hum of the fridge louder than anything she had ever said to me. Peace wasn't something I chased anymore. It was something I had by default. As for her, I don't know exactly what became of the version of her who needed control. Maybe she tried to rebuild her image. Maybe she clung to that man in loafers. Maybe she sat in the same kitchen staring at the space where the key used to be. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I didn't leave to punish her. I left because I finally understood that love without respect isn't love, it's a leash. And I wasn't wearing one anymore. She thought she had asked for space. By the time she realized what that really meant, it was too late. Because the truth is simple. She didn't lose me when I walked out the door. She lost me the moment I went quiet. And once a man like me goes quiet, you don't get him back. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.